Bioshock Infinite is one of the most gripping games I've ever played. It nails every facet from the gameplay to the story to the characters. If you're wondering if the game itself is actually any good or if all of those review sites are full of crock, I'll answer that for you right now. Yes, it really is that good. And if you have any love for video games as a visual medium, you owe it to yourself to experience this game. One of the things people loved about the original Bioshock was the way it told stories all around Rapture with environmental clues. Bioshock Infinite does the same to a much greater and much more effective degree. I probably spent about an hour in the first few minutes of the game just wandering around and absorbing everything that is the floating city of Columbia. And the city is a truly fascinating place, seeing different propaganda signs, fake horses, real birds, and people having conversations with each other. It's really difficult to not stop and admire what is happening around you. When you play, truly absorb everything you see. The city is rich in detail, life, and nuances that need to be appreciated. You're going to hear this from pretty much anyone who has played it, but the character of Elizabeth is one of the most incredible technical and creative achievements this industry has. She's one of the most likable and believable video game characters that you'll ever see, and this is all done without trying to make her look as realistic as possible. Elizabeth shows, much like Telltale's Walking Dead game, that you don't need polygons to make people. There were so many times that something happened in the game and I immediately looked over to Elizabeth to see how she responded to it, and I could tell exactly how she felt thanks to her body language and the animation in her face. Her face is over-animated just enough to easily convey her state without making her come off as completely cartoonish. One of the many things that I really enjoyed about Elizabeth as a central character is that she isn't a love interest for main character Booker DeWitt. They call each other partners, which is probably the best description they have, as shown through the story and even more so in the gameplay. And Booker himself is also a wonderful character, voiced by Troy Baker, who for the record is completely underappreciated for his voice work. He does an excellent job, but everything about Elizabeth makes her the shining star. Of course, you may not care about any of that and just want to know if the game itself is any good or not. And that answer is also yes. The gameplay is easily the strongest that the Bioshock series has ever had, even if it is rooted in familiarity. You once again have one hand for guns and the other hand for vigors, which is this game's plasmids. Every vigor has two ways of using it, usually some kind of shot or holding the button for a landmine or trap version. The vigors may not come off as particularly creative or inventive this time around, but they're still effective in shootouts and enjoyable to use. The previous Bioshock games had you sneaking around a dark, spooky, almost claustrophobic Rapture. Infinite doesn't have that, instead going for wide open areas and a lot more gun-toting soldiers. Because of this, you're doing a lot less trap setups and defenses against incoming enemies. Shootouts are much more straightforward. There are still some areas where you can light oil on fire or electrify a puddle of water to dazzle enemies, but you won't need to rely on those nearly as much. When you realize this, there's a moment that it seems like Infinite's combat is less interesting than the previous games. But there are two major things that makes Infinite's gameplay far superior. The first is the Skyhook. Several areas have these railways going through the sky, and you can easily latch onto them, allowing you to speed around like a roller coaster. You can shoot at people from here, land on vantage points, find hidden weaponry, gain ridiculous mobility, or use the Sky Strike to land down and punch some sucker straight to death. It'll keep you constantly moving and getting around enemies who are hiding or sniping at you, and it's one of the coolest and most invigorating things I've ever seen in a shooter. They've practically become integral when some of the larger enemies show up, like the Iron Patriots, giant robots of our founding fathers wielding Gatling guns, or the far more terrifying Handyman, who will continually chase you down, making the Skyhook your best option to get some distance and deal some punishment. The Skyhook is freaking cool. The other thing that makes Infinite's gameplay excellent is also the game's biggest draw, Elizabeth. She is so incredibly useful during combat that during the brief moments when she's not around, you'll wish really, really hard that she was. At no point in time do you need to protect or cover Elizabeth. She's never a focus and never in any real danger. In fact, the game tells you outright that you don't need to worry about her at all. She'll keep herself in cover and out of harm's way. She is never a liability, but rather an asset. During combat, she'll call out to you saying that she found you some ammo or extra health or some money. An easy button press has you turn to where she is, catch the item, and go straight back into the game. This becomes so invaluable in some of the later scenarios. Not only does tossing you a new gun give you a healthy ammo supply, it's also quicker than reloading most weapons. It's tactically advantageous to use what she gives you. And it doesn't happen so often that you're catching something every few seconds, and you never have a huge advantage or disadvantage against whatever it is you're fighting. It's an awesome mechanic that can cause some of the most pivotal and badass moments you can have while firing a gun. Elizabeth can also use her special powers to open up tears in the fabric of reality to summon in additional things. You can direct her to create some cover, summon in a turret, or cause a box of weapons to appear. You can freely do this as many times as you want in any battle, but you can only have one thing summoned at a time. This ability, along with the use of the Skyhook, lets you plan your strategy on the fly and quickly adapt to any situation. One thing you may notice while playing is that it seems like the city of Columbia is a little bit more linear than Rapture. And that's kind of true, but I prefer to think of it as Columbia being a much more focused and structured. There aren't as many deviating paths, but there still will be times that you can go into optional buildings for new supplies, or have Elizabeth lockpick her way into another room. This is useful for finding infusions, bottles that will increase your maximum health, shields, or vigor requiring salts. You can also find gear, which is clothing you can wear to give yourself passive abilities, or voxophones, which are the new audio logs. Even though the whole audio log thing is kind of a played out trope since the original Bioshock, it's still used very effectively in Infinite to enrich the story, and thankfully they're all kept pretty short. I can't finish this without mentioning the story. The pacing is fantastic. At first I was actually a little afraid, thinking this was just going to be a shooter with vague gameplay ties to the Bioshock franchise, but thankfully they let you know that you're playing a Bioshock game very early on with excellent use of imagery. The action is expertly broken up with several moments where you can just take a breather, either enjoying the city of Columbia or checking out optional buildings for new supplies and sometimes additional character development. There are also moments where it's clear that shooting the first thing you see isn't the best option. It's these moments that let you enjoy the experience presented to you instead of being shoved along to the next moment they want you to think is cool. Bioshock Infinite knows the story it wants to tell, and it takes its time telling it to you. It hits all the right beats perfectly, and it doesn't wane your interest after a pivotal moment, nor does it fail to hold your attention early on. It prods into issues with racism, religion, and working class economics, but at no point does it preach to you or tell you which is morally right or wrong. It simply presents it to you as this is how the world is. The plot stays intriguing throughout thanks to a strong bond between Booker and Elizabeth, interesting side characters, and questions that will leave you wanting to know the answers. And the way the ending is handled is one of the best I've ever seen. It has a lengthy denouement that will wrap up everything you saw, and for pretty much everybody, will leave you with your jaw wide open with vivid realization. Bioshock Infinite is fantastic, and I love that everything that it does can only be done by a video game. It wouldn't work as a movie or a TV show or a book. It's one of the finest examples that video games as a visual medium can be far superior than anything else. It's also really damn fun. Shooting a dude with your gun, then blasting them away with a vigor, and then escaping on your Skyhook is just cool. Bioshock Infinite is absolutely deserving of a 10 out of 10. Any and all gripes that I had with it are so minute and nitpicky that they aren't even worth bringing up. Now you'll notice from the footage that I played the Xbox 360 version, and that was a mistake. I really recommend the PC one as you'll have a lot better visuals, all of your vigors are ready with a button press, and you won't have to worry about some frame rate issues in some later areas in the game. So if you can, I really recommend the PC version if you can. Just find a way to play it. And don't be surprised when several months from now, you start seeing it pop up everywhere as a nominee for 2013's Game of the Year.